Can the cameras from last year's Galaxy S21 really compete with Apple's newest iPhone? Stay tuned to find out. How's it, Grant here? Welcome to another camera comparison with the iPhone 13. Today I've got it up against the Galaxy S21. So let's see how Apple's newest iPhone stacks up against Samsung's competitor from last year. And I know the S22 is right around the corner, but the S21 is still a very capable phone with a very capable set of cameras. It has a standard 12 megapixel wide and ultra wide angle cameras similar to the iPhone 13, but it also has a 64 megapixel telephoto lens capable of 3 times hybrid zoom. The main sensor on the S21 is also capable of a much longer zoom range than the iPhone 13. It's capable of shooting up to 30 times digital zoom, while the iPhone 13 is limited to a 5 times digital zoom. And the S21 zoom is pretty capable, anywhere between 10 to 20 times zoom. So iPhone is really not going to be much of a competition as far as long range zoom. But the main wide and ultra wide angle cameras seem to be pretty similar. And Apple's upgraded its camera system this year, not so much in the ultra wide, that still seems to be the same as the iPhone 12 for the most part. But in the main sensor, they've actually got larger pixels to help with low light performance. And they also have the sensor shift stabilization that was found in the iPhone 12 Pro Max from last year. They brought that here to the standard iPhone 13. I didn't really see a lot of stabilization gains in the 12 Pro Max last year, but we'll see how it works here in the iPhone 13. So as I always do, I'm going to show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions to help you decide which of these two camera systems might be best for you. So take a look at all the photos and videos and let me know what you think. Everyone, so this is a rear video test of the iPhone 13 and the Galaxy S21 Ultra. You can see here they're both recording from the rear facing cameras there. This is being shot at 4K 30 frames per second, and we're starting out with the ultra wide angle camera on each right now. So I'll just pan around to give you a feel for what this looks like here on each of these two phones, and the field of view, the color differences, all that. Again, I'll just pan down one more time to see how the exposure is with the sky, because sometimes when I pan down, the sky gets blown out, and both seem to be doing a pretty good job with that, as you can see there. I'll pan over to the left so I can check out the trees and all the shadows and everything else looking pretty good there. So let's go ahead and shift over to the main lens here on each. So there we go on the iPhone 13 and S21. And so I'll pan around here with the main lens so you can check these out. Notice any differences in the colors between the ultra wide and this one, as well as exposure adjustments, etc. So let's go ahead and pan over here to the right, and we'll test zoom on the cell tower like I usually do. So let's go into, let's try max 3 times, I think, digital zoom there on the iPhone at 4K. Then you've got 3 times optical here on the S21, and you can actually go all the way up to a 12 times digital on the S21 right there. And so let's go ahead and back this out to 1 times on each. And let's go ahead and test autofocus on the post with the iPhone first. So nice and snappy autofocus from the iPhone, and also some pretty decent background blur or bokeh or shallow depth of field, whatever you want to refer to it as, especially given the smaller 12 megapixel sensor. Let's try with the Galaxy S21 Ultra or Galaxy S21, and focus here on the S21, nice and snappy as well. Also with some nice bokeh there, a little bit slower to focus there on that one. Let's try one more time, and there we go. So let's go ahead and try to test stabilization here as we walk down the stairs. And walk it through the pathway, and actually let's go ahead and try to jog it through the pathway to test out the stabilization here. And we'll pull up here and pan up into the sky, into the tree line, to see how it handles for this really bright afternoon light here. Alright, so here's a quick test on the rear facing cameras for cinematic mode on the iPhone 13 and portrait video on the Galaxy S21. I just wanted to test this on a person, a human subject, because S21 didn't seem to do as well on my dog, but iPhone 13 did pretty well. So let's just test this out on a person. So I'm just trying to do a quick vlog here, and so I'll just pan around so you can see how this looks like if you can trick up the background processing here on that blurred out background. And I'll start walking as well so we can see if stabilization will throw this off at all in any way. So there you go, just a quick test of how cinematic mode on the iPhone 13 and portrait video works here on the rear facing cameras in some afternoon light here. Let me know what you think. Alright everyone, this is going to be a front-facing camera test with the iPhone 13 and Galaxy S21. You can see there they are both recording from the front-facing cameras, and this is being recorded at 4K 30 frames per second here. And I'm in my usual testing spot to start out, outdoors in some shade, because I don't want to have any kind of harsh lighting on these front-facing cameras to start. I want to give you the optimal video footage here in some pretty controlled lighting. And so I'll go ahead and step over into a little bit more harsher lighting here. You can see here the sun's coming down in front of me, and you can see how the cameras are handling that. And let's just go ahead and pan around so you can see how these cameras and the video quality changes into the changing lighting conditions. So with the light behind me here, the afternoon sky or sun right behind me, and both of these phones are actually doing a pretty good job of handling that light. Usually a lot of phones will blow out the background and overexpose it, but pretty even exposure here, especially even if I come here now with the sun directly on these front facing cameras. Both are still doing a pretty good job of controlling that exposure and everything else with that video quality. So I'll start walking you to stabilization as well, so you can see what that looks like here between the iPhone 13 and the Galaxy S21. So let me know what you think of this front-facing footage here at 4K. So here's a front-facing camera test of the cinematic mode on the iPhone 13 and portrait video on the Galaxy S21. Both create this artificial background blur here in the video footage. And I'm starting on the shades with some controlled lighting, so this should give each of these phones the optimal opportunity to provide the good edge detection with some nice background blur here. So I'll just pan around so you can see how these change, if at all, into the different light conditions here, and how that background blur is being handled. And I'll actually go ahead and walk over to test stabilization to see if we can kind of trick this out to see if the effect fades into any kind of changing conditions in the background. And I'll also walk over here to some harsher lighting to see how that affects things. You can see the lights now coming down directly in front of me and how that might be affecting the picture quality and or that background blur effect with the light kind of going in and out here with the shade and mixture of that bright afternoon light. So Everyone, so here's some low light video with the iPhone 13 and Galaxy S21. This is at 4K 30 frames per second with the ultra wide angle lens to start here. So I'll pan around to give you a feel for how these ultra wide angle lenses compare in this particular low light situation. And from what I'm seeing in the viewfinder, the Galaxy S21 is considerably brighter than the iPhone 13 with the ultra wide angle lens here at the expense of more noise. And so let's go ahead and punch into the main camera on each. So iPhone 13 and Galaxy S21, and you'll immediately notice that the image got much brighter, and that's because these main cameras let in more light, so obviously the image quality is going to be a little bit brighter here. And I'll pan around to see how this looks, and into that bright street light they're actually both doing a fairly decent job. Maybe the S21 flaring it out a tad bit more, but it is a bright street light. And if you're wondering, there are some clouds, so that's why it's kind of grayish. It's not pitch black here. And let's go ahead and pan this way and start walking to test stabilization and see how these perform in some low light. And usually there's a bit more jitter in low light, so pay attention to that. And we'll be moving over to a much darker area to see how they perform in a different lighting situation. And already it's getting darker as I start to round this corner, and they're both brightening up the image much more than what I'm seeing with my own eyes. And there is some noise here because of that. And we'll pull up here. I'll pan up into the sky, and again there are some clouds here, so as you can see there, it is a bit grayish. You can see some of the cloud definition actually right there on each, but yeah, you're gonna get a lot of noise because it is trying to brighten up the scene here. And I'll pan over here to the left where a bit of a mixed lighting situation. It's darker down this alleyway with some lighting, so you can kind of see what that looks like here in this particular low light situation. So there's your 4K video test on both phones. So here's some low light video from the front facing cameras on the iPhone 13 and Galaxy S21. This is being shot at 4K 30 frames per second, and I'm starting out at my usual testing spot in some pretty good lighting conditions here in a bit of low light to give you a feel for how these cameras perform in some fairly good lighting in this particular scenario. As you can see here, there's lights to the left and to the right of me as well as behind me. You can see how these front facing cameras are handling all that. And as far as what I can see in the viewfinder, the iPhone is skewing to a much warmer color temperature, whereas the S21 is on the much cooler side of the spectrum there. And I think somewhere in between is what the actual color looks like. So none of these are actually nailing the color representation. The iPhone is definitely warmer. It is a warmer color tone for these lights, but not as cool as S21 is showing, and definitely not as warm as the iPhone is showing, in case you're wondering. So let's go ahead and start walking to test stabilization. And we'll move over into a much darker area so we can see how these cameras perform in a bit of a more difficult lighting situation here. And so I'll also be walking by a fountain to my right so we can test out the microphone quality as well against that background noise. And so let's pull up here and we'll pan all the way around so you can see how these front facing cameras do into a bunch of those bright street lights. And from what I can see, the S21 is definitely flaring that out a bit more than the iPhone is right there. And let's move over here back into this darker area so you can see what this looks like side by side. At least from what I can see, the S21 is brightening this up a bit more than the iPhone. And again, the iPhone is definitely still a warmer color temperature than the overall cooler end of the temperature that the S21 is showing. And that's going to do it, I think, for this camera comparison. So let me know what you thought about all the photos and videos from the iPhone 13 and the Galaxy S21. I think it's going to come down to what kind of image processing you prefer. But to be really honest, I don't think you're going to get really natural colors with either of these if that's your thing. They're both going to boost the colors a bit. Samsung maybe a little bit more than Apple, but they're both are not going to give you any kind of a natural color representation. And while Apple may have improved their low light performance, it's only incrementally. I think maybe most people would say the S21 did better, but that's only because it's brighter, and brighter isn't always better. It's going to come down to what you prefer in low light. Do you want night to look more like night, or do you want to be able to see what you're shooting without using your flash? So in the end, it's going to come down to what kind of processing and image processing you like better, how Apple does it or how Samsung does it. But again, neither is going to give you the true representation. I still think Apple has only incrementally improved their low light performance. So that's just my quick summary of what I thought, but I'm interested to know what you think. So leave me a comment and let me know which one you preferred and why. Any other questions or comments, leave them down below as well, and I'll try to answer what I can. As always, thanks for watching.